It was an extremely busy weekend for the BYU football program on the recruiting front, with 14 official visits happening simultaneously. They picked up 3 commitments out of the weekend, and it indicates to me that some of the outrage over BYU football and their quote-unquote inability to recruit might be a little bit overblown.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who we like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and we are brought to you today by our friends over at FanDuel. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but right now this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, something for everybody every single day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. All right, BYU football picked up 3 commitments over the weekend. We're going to go in chronological order of how they came in, and the biggest one, just due to the star rating system, was the first one that came in. LaMason Waller officially announcing he's committed to BYU. He actually did it while he was on campus, officially announcing that commitment. It had been expected. Greg Biggins, among others from 24/7 Sports, had put in a crystal ball, indicating they believe that's where he would end up, and obviously following through on that. Who is LaMason Waller? Well, he's a kid out of Sultana High School in Hesperia, California. And if you watch his highlight reel, everybody, this is a young man who is an incredible wide receiver. His highlight reel is full of him just running defensive backs ragged, both from the outside receiver spots and also the interior slot receiver area. So it shows his versatility. Now, that's one thing that BYU prides their wide receivers on being able to do, is they believe that each of their wide receivers should be able to play from any part of the field, whether they're a Z, an X, an H, or whatever you want to term them as a wide receiver. They want them to be able to play from the slot. They want to be able to play off the line. That's why I want to be able to have them play in man press coverage and be able to beat that press coverage. It is something that I see from LaMason Waller, is he shows that skill set, and obviously that'll be honed during his time as a BYU Cougar. The bigger thing about LaMason Waller's commitment is this is a young man that was influenced by guys like Tim McTire from his days in junior high. Obviously, Tim McTire, many of you might recall, a star player, member of that 1996 BYU football team that went to the Cotton Bowl, one of the all-timers at cornerback for BYU. Well, he told LaMason Waller about BYU early on in his football career, and once Fesi Sitake was able to get in and meet with LaMason Waller, there was a relationship that developed, and it ultimately yielded BYU a 4-star pickup for their wide receiver room. I'll say this about Fesi Sitake real quick, just while I'm on the topic. Fesi Sitake remains, I think, an underappreciated asset for the BYU football program. He's an incredible recruiter. If he gets in the room with the recruit's family and the recruit themselves, more often than not, Fesi is going to convert that, and we did that with LaMason Waller here. The other thing about the LaMason Waller commitment is, if you look at his offer list at points during his BYU career, not his BYU career, he'll have his BYU career coming up, but during his high school career to date, he has had interest from Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ole Miss, Oregon. Also was a one-time commitment to the University of Washington and the Huskies. So he has had his fair share of options when it comes to his high school career, and ultimately BYU won out in the end. It's absolutely incredible that BYU won a kid of this caliber. 6'2" wide receiver, has got all the size you want in a guy that's going to come in and I think compete right away for playing time for BYU. I really like his skill set. The thing about it also is it gives BYU another weapon in their passing game. Any quarterback right now that's looking at BYU and considering signing with the Cougars has just got to take a look at the roster for BYU wide receiver wise and understand you've got guys like Cody Hagan who haven't even seen the field yet, and Cody Hagan might be the most decorated wide receiver to come out of BYU, come out of Utah high school recruiting history in recent memory. LaMason Waller coming from Southern California. Dominique McKenzie, who's an absolute burner, who's going to be a guy that's going to be a freshman this year. The future for the BYU wide receiver room is in very capable and very talented hands. And a guy like Fesi Sitake leading the way as their position coach should indicate that BYU has got a bevy of options for whoever the quarterback ends up being this year and beyond. I look at Darius Lassiter as a guy that's going to have a breakout campaign this year. Everything I'm hearing about him is he is locked and loaded and ready to go, but that's not to discount what guys like a Chase Roberts, a Cody Epps, a Keelan Marion, a Parker Kingston, all those guys offer a lot when it comes to the wide receiver room. But then you add LaMason Waller to the mix beginning next year. It feels like BYU's wide receiver core for the foreseeable future in the Big 12 is going to be deep. It's going to be talented, and it's absolutely going to be something that BYU's quarterbacks can rely upon, having talented receivers to throw the ball to. That is a big part of recruiting high-level talent at the quarterback position, because they want to know who they're going to have around them to help make them look good. I think this is a big commitment for BYU, because I'll be frank, BYU in the era of independence wouldn't even sniffed getting LaMason Waller to come to BYU. It just would not have happened. And I know the BYU's pitch back in the day was we're a Power 5 adjacent program when they were independent. We were playing a Power 5 caliber schedule. Well, you didn't have what was then the Power 5, now the Power 4 label alongside your name. Since BYU has added that label as a member of the Big 12 Conference, it has made an incredible difference. A lot of people have poo-pooed BYU's recruiting classes under Kalani Sitake, but traditionally he has brought in 3-star heavy classes, but in reality has gotten 4 or 5-star production out of those groups. This is not a 3-star prospect. LaMason Waller is a bona fide 4-star prospect coming to BYU, and that is a big addition for the Cougars, because it's going to obviously show BYU can recruit the big boys, because I mentioned that offer list just a minute ago. Those are the who's who of college football, and if they can beat teams like that for a kid like LaMason Waller, that indicates that BYU's got some recruiting juice that some BYU fans don't want to believe that the BYU football program has. They believe that BYU basketball has it right now with what Kevin Young is doing, but I don't think that Kalani Sitake and the BYU football program can recruit at that level. It's a different world when you're recruiting football versus basketball. Let me be very clear about that. I feel like it's comparing apples and oranges, but the bigger point to be made here is don't get too hasty in casting off Kalani Sitake and his staff. When their backs are against the wall, they come out swinging, and more often than not, they have had some very nice additions. And the other thing about it is, as we're going to talk about here momentarily, BYU's recruiting reach is going further and further than it ever has before. And this is a program that has traditionally been able to recruit fairly decently nationwide, but now that they have the Big 12 and Power 4 designation alongside their name, they're getting into bigger and bigger areas and getting bigger and bigger names to commit. And I think none bigger than a guy like LaMason Waller adding to that. Is BYU's reach going to go deeper into the Peach State? Because apparently Georgia loves BYU and BYU loves Georgia. We'll talk about BYU's next commitment and a kid coming out of Alpharette, Georgia in just a moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, I love sports. That's why I do this podcast. It's what I do, sports radio, every single day. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. My wife can attest to this. She's been married to me for almost 10 years, and it's been 10 years of sport after sport after sport. But as the playoffs wind down this time of year, the sports don't seem to be sportsing as much. But the best part is FanDuel is helping you keep the sports going whenever I or you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up any bets anytime you're in the mood and get on it with our friends at FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus every single day. That's daily, my friends. That's right. There's something for everybody every single day all summer long. I just saw this on FanDuel. BYU basketball, you know that recruiting juice that Kevin Young, KYU, has got for the big Cougars? They are now 55-1 in terms of their odds to win the national championship this coming season. You want to take a flyer on the Cougars before those odds change? Do it right now. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com to get started today. It's all courtesy of FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. Are you sick of watching Fox Sports or ESPN and hearing all those talking heads shouting at one another? I'm going to turn down the volume to be able to manage to watch it. Well, this part is I want you guys to switch over to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day, bringing you the can't miss stories without all the streaming going on the other networks. It has all the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube and also available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, we just talked about LaMason Waller adding to BYU's recruiting haul. Well, the second commitment that came out of the weekend went all the way to Alpharette, Georgia. That is Tucker Kelleher, who is committed to the BYU football program. And the overall notion I get reading some of the comments about his commitment to the BYU football program is he's a project. He's a guy that BYU shouldn't be offering at this point, shouldn't be bringing in. Okay, let me be very clear about this. The initial rating that Tucker got from 24/7 Sports is an 85. That is a higher level base level just ranking for a kid than most BYU prospects that are quote unquote projects in their history under Kalani Sitake. This is not one of those Elisa Tuiaki Ed Lamb specials. That is not what this is. Kevin Gilbride has coached a number, and I mean a number of high level tight ends at the NFL level, and he knows what it takes to get to that level as a coach and obviously coaching those players at that level. When he sees talent, I believe he can spot it. And the one thing about Tucker Kelleher here is that 6'6", 220 pounds as a tight end. That is a huge frame to work with. That's why BYU is bringing Tucker into the fold here. Now, his offer list is not nearly as extensive as we just talked about with LaMason Waller. He's got Appalachian State, Army, Buffalo, Coastal Carolina, among others on that. So a bevy of G5 offers out there. But there is something that BYU saw when Tucker came on campus for BYU's recent summer camp series that they saw and said, you know what? Let's try and get this kid. And they got him. I think this is an indication that BYU still is willing to go and add high upside type players. Yes, you may call them a project, but these are the type of projects to take on. The projects that BYU took on at times under the previous regime, most notably under Ed Lamb and Elisa Tuiaki, was essentially they would take guys, and if they committed to BYU, great. But as soon as another program was recruiting any of those guys, BYU just gave up. It was baffling to watch it unfold. But for whatever reason, BYU would just stop recruiting him. Tucker Kelleher here is not going to have a bevy of programs knocking down his door, but you can guarantee that other programs are going to continue to chase him. And BYU saw something after he came on campus and said, you know what, let's get him in the fold right now and make him a part of this recruiting class. Kevin Gilbride has got a lot of tight ends already on his depth chart in terms of looking at what BYU has got. You obviously lead with guys like Keanu Hill. You also look at Reiner Swanson, Jackson Bowers, Ray Paulo, Mata Avataase. Like, you just go down the list. There's a number of tight ends on BYU's tight end depth chart, similar to their wide receiving core. But the nice part is you obviously always want to add extra talent to that group. And that's where I think Tucker Kelleher adds to what BYU is trying to do here. So I think this is an underrated pickup, but don't be falling into the trap of saying, oh, great, they're back to just taking projects and thinking that they can turn these guys into star players. So what if his offer list is not extensive as a LaMason Waller? A guy like Kelleher came to BYU, showed what he could do at camp, and Kevin Gilbride, as I mentioned, coming from his NFL background, he's not going to screw around and say, you know what, I'm going to take this guy and think and see what happens with him. BYU knows they have no time to waste in terms of Power 4 level prospects. You can't take on guys that you're going to develop for 3 or 4 years and hope that you get 1 or 2 stellar years out of them. The Chris Wilcox story is a phenomenal story. Let me be very blunt about that. It's cool to see guys like Chris Wilcox, who's a 2-star athlete who played wide receiver and did track in high school and came to BYU and was developed into a NFL caliber cornerback by the time his BYU career ended. The problem is you had to wait through 3+ years for him really to become what he ultimately became. BYU cannot afford to have that. And I think that they see something here with this Tucker kid coming to BYU and not being a guy that's going to need 2 or 3 years. Maybe he needs a redshirt year to bulk up because it's 6'6", 220. He's a little bit skinny and you watch that on his film. But what I love about him is he's a willing blocker despite being that tall. It can be hard for guys at that size. And I will never be 6'6". I am 6 foot on a good day. I'm just a shade under it most days. But to be 6'6" and to be able to kind of engage and get low enough to block guys, it takes effort. And that's what this Kelleher kid brings to BYU. And I think that it will serve him well as he develops into a tight end for the Cougars. Once again, Kevin Gilbride, he knows talent when he sees it. And he obviously saw something. I'm sure that Aaron Roderick was in the mix with that. Fesi Sitake, who we've already talked about today, is also the passing game coordinator. So obviously he has a say in this. But they saw something on tape and throughout the camp series that they had that he was on campus for and decided this was a worthy offer. So I'm going to take BYU's offensive staff and say that they know what they're doing here. They're bringing in high-level talent, obviously a proven option like LaMason Waller, but they're also adding an underrated, maybe an under-recruited guy in Tucker Kelleher here and adding him to the fold thinking that, hey, his senior year this year upcoming, he could blow up, and some other programs are probably closer to home for him down there in Georgia and the greater South area might be come knocking. But BYU already believed in him, offered him, and got the commitment, and they'll be looking to hold on to that throughout his upcoming senior season. And we'll see how it unfolds. But I sometimes it baffles me how different storylines get accepted as quote unquote truth about BYU recruiting and certain recruits out there. But do not believe this one. This is the type of quote unquote project you take on every single day and you bet on it, because I think that this has got all the upside in the world. And that's a similar story to what we'll finish out today's show with, is that Ulavai Fetuli comes to BYU, also from Southern California, announced this commitment on Sunday evening. What does he offer? Well, he offers a ton of upside, but the best part is it's not just offensively. He also could be a stud defensive player, and we'll get to him momentarily as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at eBay. Passion, drive, and patience, everybody. The formula for winning championships also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance right now. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. It's ebaymotors.com. Once again, eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, what are you doing? Join our Locked On Cougars Insider Group right away. Get updates from me in live time coming to your phone in the form of a text message. Think about that. It's as simple as it comes. You're not having to go search a message board or go to a website and log in. You get updates from me right to your phone in a text message. You can fire back with text of your own and get one-on-one updates. We can go back and forth on topics that you may have an idea for the show and the like. 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you. $5 a month afterwards to be a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Support us today. Join us on Locked On Cougars, our Insider Group. Click the link in the show notes, whether you're watching and or listening to this, and join us today. All right, final commitment for BYU from the weekend comes from Ulavai Fetuli out of La Habra, California. Now, I went to La Habra High School, and we talked just barely about Tucker Kelleher, standing 6'6", 220 pounds. Well, Fetuli is 6'5", 240 pounds. He's a full-grown man at this point. He's got an 86 rating from 24/7 Sports. Does not have a composite rating currently, but I expect that will change in due time. But the thing about this for BYU is that Fetuli is coming to the Cougars as a true athlete. He has played both tight end and defensive end at the high school level and shows skills on both fronts. That is the thing about this addition for BYU that excites me, is that Fetuli comes to the Cougars and could end up being a stud defensive end. Maybe at 240 pounds, he's got the frame to bulk up, maybe play defensive tackle at 280, 290 pounds. Or if he sticks on the offensive side of the football, his skill set shows some shades of guys. I'm trying to think, like, Ray Paulo right now is probably the best comparison. Mason Wake previously. Mason Wake, remember, he was just this incredible athlete playing that fullback / H-back role. So it's not necessarily a true tight end position, but you do a bevy of different things. And that's what Fetuli offers to BYU. The other part about it is he's an athletic kid, played basketball for La Habra High School, so he is not a one-trick pony when it comes to his prep sports, and I really like that about guys at the high school level. Here's the deal. I have people ask me every so often about, like, my kids growing up, like, Jake, are you going to have your kids specialize? Heck no, I'm not going to have them specialize. I'm going to have them play a bevy of different sports because I want them to get kind of the full experience of being a kid and playing sports, but more importantly, I think it offers an ability to develop your skills in different ways. A guy like Ulavai Fetuli, his basketball skill set serves him extremely well at tight end. Think about it. When he goes up to go get a pass that may be a little bit high in the end zone, well, guess what? That's just going up for a rebound in basketball. The other thing is he learns positioning on the basketball court that will help them in terms of having his footwork right when he's out there on the football field, whether it is rushing the passer or if he's blocking a guy at tight end. The crossover for guys who play multiple sports is absolutely awesome. And I know why coaches value it so highly, that guys play different sports alongside the sport that they hope to go pro in. And that's what the case here is with Ulavai Fetuli. So I look at his commitment for BYU as a win-win wherever he ends up. I'm sure that Fesi Sitake and the passing game, along with Kevin Gilbride, will do nothing more than to have his skill set as a guy who can go out and be a big-bodied tight end for BYU at 6'5", 240. He's already the size you want at a true inline tight end. But the other thing about this is Kelly Poppinga on the defensive side is like, hey, no. 6'5", 240. That's my next star pass rusher. Get him over on this side of the football for me and let me work my magic with him. So each one of these commitments we've talked about today, each of them offer a different storyline. LaMason Waller, the most polished of the crew. There's absolutely no doubt. That's why he's a 4-star prospect. You look at the Tucker Kelleher situation, what he offers to BYU is an unpolished gem, potentially, that BYU just needs to bring the best out of him, and he's already showing flashes of that at the high school level, and for whatever reason has been overlooked by other programs, literally in his own backyard in Alpharette, Georgia. With the case of Ulavai Fetuli, is he coming to BYU? He's from the Orange County / Southern California area, and he comes to BYU. He's also had offers from other Power 5 programs like Cal. So and by the way, the other thing about this is I already talked about it. He's a multi-sport athlete, and he offers two-way upside for the Cougars. There are a lot worse ways you can go when it comes to bringing in guys who are just great athletes. Let their bodies develop, let their skill sets develop, and then put them in a position to succeed. These are I use the term project that you want to go after, because you're never quite sure how a guy is going to develop. A guy like Ulavai Fetuli could come to BYU, could easily pack on 40 pounds to that 240 pounds he's already listed at, and end up as a defensive tackle for BYU. And at 6'5", that's ideal size for a 3-technique defensive tackle in Jay Hill's defense. So I really like how BYU is approaching this. Obviously, you want proven guys who have already kind of established what they're going to be at the next level, but you also can bring in guys who you're not quite sure ultimately where they end up, but they're an incredible athlete, and then you go bet on the fact that their athleticism alone will make them a Division I / Power 4 contributor, and then see where it ultimately ends up that they end up contributing. Whether it's a tight end for Ulavai Fetuli, whether it's a defensive end, defensive tackle, maybe he grows into being an offensive lineman. Like I said, if that weight continues to go up, he could end up being an offensive tackle or an offensive guard. There is no downside, it feels like, to adding guys like Ulavai Fetuli, and an 86 rating indicates that he's already a pretty highly thought of guy. That 86 is already working its way towards 4-star territory. Now, a couple of you have asked me with regards to the star ratings and how it goes. The biggest thing with star ratings to understand is that with a 5-star talent, there's only 32 of them issued by 24/7 Sports. Their whole idea is that the 32 guys that they designate 5-star status, they're expected to be 3 or 4 years down the line first-round draft picks in the NFL draft. There's 32 picks in the first round of the NFL draft. There's 32 5-star prospects. The 4-star class is also similarly small. It's a little bit bigger. Obviously, it's not just 32 guys, but it's limited to 100 or less, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. And then the bevy, the vast majority of guys end up in the 3-star classification when it comes to high school rankings. That's not a bad place to be, because not every 3-star is made the same. An 86 in the case of Ulavai Fetuli versus an 88 in the case of LaMason Waller. Okay, that's just kind of eye of the beholder, but I trust what 24/7 Sports has tried to develop over many, many years. They're trying to designate, okay, this is a kid who, yeah, he may need just a little bit of seasoning in the case of Ulavai Fetuli, but with an 86 rating, you get 89, 90 production out of him. That's a 4-star talent when he gets to college. So the whole idea is, going back to what I've said, is that Kalani Sitake, he has always tried to bring in talent and get the 4 or 5-star production out of that talent, no matter if they're a 2, 3, 4, or a 5-star, which BYU rarely has added, but maybe some point down the road, as they continue to kind of build some momentum here, they may very well do that. But the bigger point to be made here is I really like what BYU is doing on the recruiting front right now. Don't believe the narrative that BYU football can't recruit. Don't believe the narrative that BYU basketball is going to absolutely blow them out of the water. It's two different universes that they're operating in, and both of them having success, let's just be frank about it, is good for BYU athletics. You want to have a very strong football program. You want to have a strong men's basketball program, because those are the two chief revenue generators for an athletics department, and particularly one at BYU that has to make its own money. It's not getting bailed out by the LDS Church or BYU as a main campus, the university itself. They're not paying for BYU athletics. BYU athletics has to fund itself, and having strong football and basketball programs is imperative to them being able to continue to do what they do. Now, a couple of the notes before we go on today's show is congratulations to Kenneth Rooks, the former BYU track star. He won the 3,000-meter steeplechase at the U.S. Olympic team trials. He did not make the Olympic standard time, so he's not going to automatically advance to participating in Paris, but the international rankings that'll be coming out next month should get him on his way to the Olympic Games. His former teammate James Corrigan finished third in that race, and there's an outside shot. He also could be Paris bound, but congratulations to both of them. It was really cool. I actually turned that on right as the race was finishing up. It was cool to see them being interviewed on NBC. Obviously, Kenneth Rooks has already signed a professional contract, but James Corrigan was right there in his BYU gear with the Big 12 logo on it. So it's cool to see guys like that get an opportunity to represent BYU on the biggest stage. And it's kind of funny as they were pulling away on NBC Sports, you could tell that Kenneth wanted to say something, but they didn't let him get back on the mic. It would have been cool to see what he had to say, but alas, that's kind of how it goes sometimes. Now, the other note is a big weekend for BYU's Cooper Jones. He is a freshman for the BYU men's golf program. He was golfing on the professional level on the Korn Ferry Tour this past weekend at the Compliance Solutions Championship and shot 13 under to finish 16th, finished in 16th place in his first pro start. Now, he's not a professional, but it's on the pro circuit. And after getting an exemption into that championship, him finishing inside the top 25 has actually got him a berth into this week's Korn Ferry tournament. I've got to see what the name of this coming weekend's tournament is. Let's see here. It's going to be the I apologize. I screwed up on looking at the wrong page and closed out of it. It's going to be the Memorial Health Championship presented by LRS at Panther Creek Country Club in Springfield, Illinois. Former fellow Cougars Peter Quest, and Daniel Summerhays were also in that tournament alongside Jones on the weekend. Summerhays shot 13 under, and Quest shot 13 under. Summerhays shot 9 under par. So congratulations to both of them on solid showings. But this is kind of funny for Cooper Jones because he's got a mission call right now. He is headed out on a mission, but he's going to be playing his second straight week on the professional circuit on the Korn Ferry Tour. He's set to serve a mission in Peru beginning in September. He made 15 birdies in his first 2 rounds to post back-to-back 666s and earn a spot in the weekend, and obviously finishing out the tournament in style and punching his ticket to a second straight weekend on the Korn Ferry Tour. It's pretty cool news for a young man like that. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Monday edition of the show. By the time a lot of you hear and or listen to this, I will already be on the golf course. BYU is having their annual media golf tournament. I will be out at that. We'll have a chance to catch up with players and coaches after the event to use in future episodes of the podcast. So stay tuned for that. But should be a fun day, and I'll have a report on that for you guys, how it went and everything on tomorrow's podcast as well. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Monday. Once again, a big thank you to all of you for making it your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the podcast. And until tomorrow, everybody, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.